Today we need to get into Jung Kook's foot apparently broken and what that's about. We also need to get into people apparently believing that a stalker had entered or broke into his apartment and what that's all about. Then we also have a member of BTS being seen at the hospital. Say Dumplings is Dave, decide hate it or not, make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell on. Make sure you join us fangirling on Patreon with some free content on Saturdays now, and let's go. Now, every time I talk about older stories, people love to get upset and ask, why am I rehashing stories and re-talking about things? Well, they're being talked about now, so a lot of people don't know about them. They're also going re-viral again. So even if I had talked about them previously, I would definitely want to talk about them again because now they're trending, they're being talked about again. So I hope that makes sense. Also, I don't know if I've said this enough, but this is literally my channel, so I will talk about whatever I want. And if you're upset about the topics that I talk about, you don't have to watch it. My name literally appears right below any video that you click on, whether that's on the front page or on my channel. So literally, if you see that name, just don't click on it. I don't know what to tell you. Jin was always believed to have not had that many friends. This was a rumor that he kind of pushed upon himself, saying that he didn't really have that many friends except the members and then maybe his family if he considers them friends. He talked about this during a live stream, and he mentioned that he would even spend a lot of days just laying down on his bed or couch or whatever and have nothing to do. And quite honestly, this is definitely relatable. I feel like this is me a lot of the time. When I was younger, I definitely wanted to have a lot more friends and I wanted to go out but did not have that opportunity to do so. Now, apparently one of his friends got into a pretty severe accident. It was like a truck that hit him, I believe. So Jin then rushed to the ER to see him to make sure he was okay and was actually quite relieved that the damages were not as bad as maybe he had initially thought. When you hear someone got run over by a truck or hit by a truck, you definitely tend to think that maybe the worst thing has happened, and you don't typically assume that if you get hit by a truck, you're going to be perfectly okay. However, he was very lucky. The damages were not as bad as maybe Jin had anticipated in his head, and that friend was able to get up, work, and do a bunch of stuff. And the reason why Jin also thought that the injuries would have been so bad was apparently the news articles were reporting the injuries as less than desirable. And I will lend a bit of a secret about news articles and reporters and that sort of stuff. Since a lot of journalists can't actually visit the celebrity or the person that is injured to actually ask them and see what's going on, they tend to just be able to make assumptions, or it's a game of a telephone. So there's one news reporter that maybe gets into the hospital and can kind of grab some information and then report on what's happening. However, it's important to know that other news sites and journalists are probably just going to take the most dramatic and the most interesting moments from that article and then report on that. So you'll just tend to hear the most dramatic things, like he instead of fractured something, he broke something, or that he's in the hospital for 3 weeks, and then that just sounds really bad, right? When in reality, just because you're in the hospital for a really long time doesn't actually mean that you're in bad condition. They could just want to make sure you get tested and you're okay. Of course, this is interesting because this wasn't the only thing that I saw on the news. There were definitely a lot of people who were talking about JK's foot injury recently. If you don't know what happened, this was right before JK went to the military. He was obviously dancing, he was doing a lot, and he had a bit of a foot injury. There was nothing serious. Obviously, if it was something very serious, he would not be able to enlist or do any of that stuff. But I think the community likes to think that it is more serious. And they do think that because they can play the victim, right? They can say many things. They can say, look, now he's strong because he's in the military, even after a foot injury. Or they can say things, which is what they're saying lately, that he did not want to enlist with a foot injury. People forced him to enlist, and he would much rather have stayed and promoted his music and all that stuff. Now, there was a chart that was going semi-viral that I was seeing in some places where it was showing the time in which any specific member started their promo for their solo stuff to when they enlisted. So you'll see on this chart, pretty much RM and J-Hope had the longest promotion time out of everyone. And I actually do remember that to be true. I do remember that they did take up a lot of space and they were able to do a lot of stuff, which is very cool. However, I feel like I'm going to get attacked or penalized for saying this, but I feel like they are definitely one of the more underrated artists in the group. So they probably did need a longer promotion period to make sure that they sold more or got their name out there as much as the other members would have. Also, J-Hope released an album that was very different from what we would have expected him to release. So there were definitely going to be people that were not going to be into that sort of thing. So he would definitely need more promotion time to find the right audience. Now they're using this to say that JK didn't want to go to the military and that he was forced to because he had the shortest promotion time. And of course he was the youngest and he didn't really need to enlist right away. And then he had a foot injury. Those are a lot of claims that don't make a lot of sense, as it seems like he was happy to enlist. But we don't really know because this is just what he's publicly putting out there. But he doesn't have to publicly put this out. And that's something that I don't think people realize. If you were to be like, I'm just going to go solo, I don't really want to do BTS anymore, then he can just literally just do that. He has no obligation to do otherwise or to join the group or to do any of that stuff. He signed a contract with his own free will stating that he would join BTS again. Why did he do that? And if he thought it would be best to be a solo career and that the group is holding him down, why sign that? And on top of that, I think people have a very interesting perspective on what success is, because they tend to think that success just means that you're constantly growing and that you're being better than everything or everyone, when everyone's definition of success is very, very different. And for JK, his definition of success could just be making music. He doesn't care about how many people it reaches. He doesn't care about the amount of money or the popularity he has. He just wants to make music. Because at this point, do you really think he needs more money? He doesn't really care or should not care about making more money or selling more albums. Should be solely about putting out things that he wants to put out. There's also a lot of concern over JK and his brother recently, as people think that a stalker might have broken into the apartment while they were together. Now, if you're not sure what happened, basically the other day we found out that JK and his brother were apparently together or within the same vicinity of each other, that they were playing games with each other. A screen recording of the game was then posted on Instagram, and that's how people found out about it. Now, there's been a lot of concern for stalkers since JK has been in the military, and a lot of people have talked about what he has said a long time ago that has drawn a lot of concern over this. So not too long ago, actually, JK did a live stream in which he talked about how stalkers need to kind of keep away from him and that he doesn't want to interact with them. He spoke about how the stalkers are still to this day at his front door, and if you were to leave his apartment, he would still see the stalkers there. This, of course, is very concerning, and this isn't really even just like a problem that is like champagne problems or that is like a celebrity problem. This is like a genuine, actual concern for people and their safety. And people are just waiting at the door for you to take a picture, hug you, touch you, or do whatever. This is scary. So a lot of people have wondered, since JK has enlisted, are there still people waiting outside his apartment for him to come home during the weekend, when he comes home during the weekends? I do think this is a legitimate concern. He hasn't been really online to really talk about how many people are waiting outside his apartment door, but I will say this, and this one thing should reassure everyone that it's actually not a huge deal, as in his safety is going to be okay. Of if anyone is going to break into his apartment or whatever the concern is. Celebrities with a lot of money and celebrities who are as wealthy and famous as he is, live in a different part of Korea than you would think. They don't live in a part where you can just walk into it. They live in a gated community in which is blocked off from other people. The gated community is so blocked off that there's like restaurants and there's this own thing within the community. So the only people that are in the community are other rich people or whatever. So hopefully that would reassure people that for the most part, these stalkers wouldn't actually be able to get into the building or really get close. They just might be in the gate area when a celebrity tries to get into the community. And also there is this intense security in that area, so definitely shouldn't be a concern for any of that. And as JK has joined the military, and when he leaves the military, he'll be more than equipped enough to be able to fight off some stalkers and immature people. I don't think there will be any stalkers that would be able to actually win a fist fight or any of that sort of thing with JK. And I'm sure he is not against slapping or pushing someone off if they were to touch him. Let me know what you think. Make sure to check out Patreon for more videos. Link down below. Thank you for this lovely comment right here. I love you. Bye.